Hi guys, okay, today we're going to talk about rotations, a little bit piggybacking off the investigation we did. So let's get started. We're looking at the complete coordinate plane, all four quadrants, and let's get into it. All right, so in the first quadrant we can see we have a rectangle, and we're going to focus on one point of that rectangle and see how rotating the entire rectangle here affects that one point. So we're going to look at point B, and we can see that point B right now is at 0.45. Okay, so our first rotation, we're going to look at quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So the two quadrants on the right-hand side, and see what happens when we rotate. Do a little rotation. So we're looking at quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Now you can see B now, the new B, the image, is at 5, -4. We started at 4, 5, and now after we did that rotation, we're at 5, -4. So if we talk about that, what actually happened to that point? The x and the y values switch places, and the y value turned negative. You can see that 4, 5 turned into 5, 4, and the y value turned negative. And what kind of rotation is that? That's a 90-degree clockwise rotation. So that's the rotation that we have there. You can see the way it's spun. That's a 90 degrees clockwise rotation. All right, so back now we're going to look at quadrant 1 and relate it to quadrant 3. And those are the two diagonal of each other. Okay, and we'll see what happens in that case. So we have our quadrant 1, and down here is quadrant 3. And you can see once again, our point B started at 4, 5. Where did it end up this time? Well, it's down here at -4, -5. So what actually happened? Well, the 4 is still in the same spot. The x is the same number, but it's the opposite sign. So 4 becomes -4, and the same thing with the y. The 5 became -5. So the x and y stayed in the same exact positions, but now they both turned negative. And what kind of rotation is that? The x and y values in the same place, they both turn negative. That's a 180-degree rotation, so a half a spin around a circle. So that's what that rotation looks like. Okay, so now we're going to look at quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Those are the two quadrants at the top, and compare what happens there. So you can see there's quadrant 1 again, and let's look at our new box. Well, if we look at point B again, B is at -5, +4. -5, +4. And the original was at 4, 5. So what happened? The x and the y values switched places again, but this time the x went negative. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. We're going from positive territory for the x. If we're going left, it's going to become more negative. But as we move to the left, we're not moving up and down, so the y is not changing. Okay, the y didn't change as far as its negative or positive value. Okay, it didn't change. Okay, it's still above the y-axis. Okay, I'm sorry, the x-axis. Okay, so what do we know? The x and the y values switched places, and the x value turned negative. And we can call that either a 270-degree clockwise rotation, which looks like that, or another way to observe that is we could also call a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation, which looks like that. So we can look at the rotations as going either left or right, except if it's 180 degrees, whether it goes left or right, of course, it's going to end up in the exact same spot. Okay, so let's look at our summary for this particular lesson. An object in quadrant 1 that is located at x, y. What's going to happen to that object? Well, in quadrant 2, remember quadrant 2 is here because the quadrants are labeled backwards, right? They go kind of counterclockwise. In that same object in quadrant 2, the x and the y values are going to change places, and that first value is going to become negative. Okay? In quadrant 3, this is quadrant down here, the x and the y are going to stay in the same position that they started in. They're just both going to turn negative. Okay, so x and y stay in the same space, but the y, both of them become negative. And at quadrant 4, which is this quadrant down here, the x and y change places, and the y value, the second value, becomes negative. So x and y changed places, and the second value becomes negative. So let's take a look at that. If we're at 0.24, and that's our object, let's look at the image. Okay, so in quadrant 4, what's going to happen? Well, the x and y are going to change places, and the y value is going to become negative, just like it said there. Okay. In quadrant 3, what happens? Quadrant 3, they stay in the same spot, 2, 4. It's still 2, 4, but they both turn negative. So the numbers are the same, but they are both negative values now. Okay. And in quadrant 2, what will you see happen? We started with x, y, and now what do we have? That was originally 2, 4. Now the x and the y have changed places to 4, 2, but the first value, that x value, is now negative. Okay, just like it's supposed to be here. You can see the first value turns negative, the second value changes, stays the same. So objects in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4 are where the x values and the y values switch. Okay, quadrant 3, the x and y values stay the same, they just turn to the opposite value, okay, from positive to negative. All right, and if we look at our rotation, that's what it looks like. Okay, if we use a rectangle, you can see we started there, we rotated down there, rotated again there, rotated again there, and rotated again. That's 360 degrees back to where we started from. Hopefully that helps you with tonight's homework, which will be attached on Google Classroom and also attached on Genesis. So get to work. If you need to look at this video once again, just look at it. If you have any questions, email me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.